Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. We're with a great guitar player today and a super interesting guy. We're with Dave Fiuczynski, often called Fuse. His music is described as unclassifiable, challenging, and invigorating, and it is definitely all three of those. He leads the underground cult band Screaming Headless Torsos, and he's toured or recorded with Jack DeJohnette, who of course play with Miles, Coltrane, and Sun Ra, Stewart Copeland from The Police, Meshell N'degeocello. If I could pronounce N'degeocello, I should pronounce Fiuczynski, right?
Yeah. Great.
This is going to be a challenge. Rudresh, Mahan Thapa, John Medeski, Hasidic New Wave, Bernie Worrell of P-Funk, Hiromi, and many more. And he's performed at festivals all over the world. And he's got some he's super talented, man. And he's really, Screaming Headless Torsos is great. If you've never heard them, I'm going to really encourage you to check them out. Born here in the States, David grew up in Germany, where he was always interested in mixing and fusing different musical elements. His recent music melds traditional melodic elements from the Middle East, Asia, India, and Eastern Europe with rock, funk, electronica, and other styles. This concept started on a gig he was playing in Morocco back in 1992. The Moroccan players noted that Jimi Hendrix had visited Morocco, and this gave Dave an idea. Hard grooves with Eastern-inflected melodies, putting the listener into a very colorful trance. Could this be the music that Jimmy would play today, which is pretty good? Fiuczynski's band KIF celebrates a living Hendrix who's kicking it in Casablanca and rocks the Casbah every Saturday night. Dave studied at New England Conservatory's Third Stream Department and is also a 2011 Guggenheim and 2009 and 2017 Massachusetts Arts Council Fellow in Composition, and he directs the Planet Microjam Institute for Advanced Microtonal Studies at Berklee College of Music. You're gonna have to take this over. His latest record.
I'm exhausted.
We're done. His latest recording is, tell me if Gerschlauer.
Yep.
Gerschlauer.
Yeah, I got all the weird names.
Yeah, but thank God I'm from New York City.
I have a monopoly on them.
And I'm not like, this is not brand, I've seen and talked to all these people. Gerschlauer, Fiuczynski, Micro Jazz featuring Jack DeJohnette on drums with music inspired by expressionist paintings. Dude, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time.
Wow, thank you.
And I love your music.
We should basically end the show right. That was already too much.
I'm exhausted, man.
Goodbye.
Man, I got to tell you a funny story. So Danny Sedonic, I grew up with him.
Really?
Yeah, Danny is Dave's percussionist. Danny and I grew up in the Bronx in the same like kind of projects, and he's like 2 years ahead of me. And he was like in middle school, I played saxophone, and I was sort of like that guy, and he was that guy on the drums in his year. And there was another guy, like, do you know a guy named Tony Lewis, who's a drummer in the city in New York?
I know the name. Yeah.
So Tony and I were really good buddies because he was a year behind Danny and a year ahead of me, and we lived right across the street of each other. So we used to play like out on the roof of the garage, all this shit you do when you got no space. And but Danny was a great drummer, man, and that was really funny when I started checking you out, and I said, oh my God, that's Danny Sedonic. So small world. Are you guys still play together?
Oh yeah. It's we're still that underground band. And Danny is great. He's a really unique percussionist. I didn't really know until I had to deal with subs. And so I'd say, okay, and here's this, you know the deal. There's this new in the B section, you pick up the stick and you do the thing. You hit the drum on the head and the side at the same time. And other percussionists were looking at me like, "Are you crazy?" And then I realized, oh, only Danny does that.
Yeah.
So he's awesome.
Is he living up in Boston, or is he down in the city still?
No, he's married and is in Long Island.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, he was a great drummer back in, way as a young kid. He was, absolutely phenomenal. So, in everything you're saying, I'm not surprised. He was extremely talented back then. But man, what a small world it is, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell him.
Hey, can you tell me, you do a lot of work on microtonal studies, and I see this mentioned in a lot of articles about you. Can you tell me what that means and what a microtone is? Because I'm not familiar with that. And I'm a little intimidated by you because I know you're like a very highly intelligent guy. So be gentle.
I wish my wife was listening right now.
I'm with you.
So if you look at a piano in our Western tuning system, we have 12 notes per octave. So if you go from middle C up an octave to C, it takes 7 notes in a normal C major scale, or if you add the chromatic notes in between, you'll have 12 equidistant notes from C, then an octave up or down to the next C, where the whole sequence starts over again. Equidistance, or equal tempered, so microtonalists call this system 12-ET. Microtones are the notes that are in between. So in Arabic music, they grid their scales off of quarter tones. So now you would have 24 notes per octave.
Oh.
There are other notes, there's inflections and so forth. For example, we have a very popular microtonal music here in the United States. It would be odd to call it microtonal music, but the blues. The blues, anytime a guitar player bends, if a piano player is playing the chords, all those sweet blue notes, those are in between the notes on the piano. They're in the cracks there. Those are microtonal notes. And the way many microtonalists get started with microtonality is, in my case, I heard this Arabic call to prayer or some kind of Indian what have you thing. And I was like, wow, I'm going to try and play that on guitar. But then you show up with your 12 note per octave ruler and you're trying to figure out the notes, and you realize a lot of those notes are in between our notes. So you have to find different ways of playing them. With fretted instruments, you can go fretless. So you're like an upright bass or a violin. With horns, the trombone is already a slide instrument. Saxophone, there's alternate fingerings. Trumpet, you can lip, or there's a quarter tone trumpet. With keyboards, what I do in my music is I have 2 keyboards, and one is tuned the top one is tuned to quarter tone sharp, and that way I can get 24 notes per octave.
Holy crap. Or
you can retune. And there are really, really cool sonorities that you can get. I always thought I was a microtonal nut. I studied with Joe Maneri and his master student, Dr. Julia Wernz, at New England Conservatory, and we were using a Greek system, 72 notes per octave.
Holy.
Now, if that's not enough, this last record with Jack DeJohnette, Philip Gerschlauer wrote some music that was in 128 notes per octave. Now, to be sure, and I'm flattered that you say I'm smart and so forth, but I was initially never interested in this. As a matter of fact, the first time I heard microtonal music, I hated it. It sounded out of tune. I actually went up to one guy. I tried to convince him to stop. But as you may know, I think Duke Ellington said this, I'm not sure, but there's only 2 kinds of music, good and bad. And I heard a smoking flute and clarinet duet written in 72 notes per octave. It was killing.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, all right, I need to check this out. And so there are whole new possibilities that can be, certainly in the realm of groove and jazz, there's a whole new universe waiting for us. I remember seeing in a musicology book that they estimate that something like 70 to 80% of the world's music is microtonal. I mean, if you check out anything from the Middle East, from Asia, anywhere, if you look at African, what is it, the xylophone? Is that the marimba? If you look at Peruvian traditional or Andean flute music, I mean, look at blues. If you look at Scandinavian traditional, the nose flute, anything that's old enough to predate, and anything that's old enough to predate Bach is not going to be in 12 notes per octave, ancient Greek music and so forth. So the question is, in a way, this is a very Western concept, microtonality. To a certain extent, we're microtonal, or to a certain extent, the rest of the world is normal and we're not.
Because we're not using microtones.
Yes.
We're using the 12 notes. How do you write? And I'm thinking in my head, God, as if music isn't difficult enough.
It's actually very simple.
Okay.
I use, and there's tons of different ways to write it, but I use our normal staff system. And there are arrows and hooks up and down. So if I want to write a C, a 12th tone sharp, instead of a sharp in front of it, I put an arrow.
Okay.
For a 6th tone, a half arrow with only one side of the arrow. And there's other notation. That's actually the easy part. If you want to be really precise, microtonalists have arbitrarily decided that every half step, so when you go from one key on the piano to the next, so let's say from C up to C sharp, they've divided that into 100 units, which they call cents.
Each half step has been divided into 100 units.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from C to C sharp is 100 cents. If you wanted to do a quarter tone in between, you would go 50 cents sharp, and so forth. And so with Philip's music, he just has numbers with plus and minus. So if you wanted C sharp, let's say a 6th tone flat, it would be minus 33. Takes a little bit to get used to, but again, that's the easy part. The hard part is playing it accurately.
Yeah.
And in the big picture, I don't want to come off as this nerdy professor. The reason I chose to do this is because it moved me. And then, you know how it is. You hear Beethoven, you love it. You check out Hendrix and you love it, or James Brown or whoever. Miles Coltrane, you try and figure it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy, often it's unfortunately not. So you have to study, practice, analyze. But in the end, I tell people, tune with your heart. That's the same thing a blues player would do. That's the reason why I got into it. So when I heard these Arabic, Turkish lines, Turkish ney, the flute, I mean, blows me away. But I have the same reaction as when I hear Jimi Hendrix play the blues. It moves me. It goes straight to my heart. I kind of classify those as in an unorthodox way as Eastern blue notes. So I wanted to play those, so I had to get a fretless guitar and learn. And as you may know, if you want to learn a new style, learn melodies.
Yeah,
that's the quickest way to unlock a new way of playing. So you learn the melodies, you learn the inflections, and then you apply them. Now, what's completely new or unorthodox with my music is I take these Eastern modes and then stack them into chords. So I have kind of an Eastern chord scale concept. Just as if you took the C major scale, if you stack that into a chord, that would outline a C major or a C major 7 chord. Well, if you take a maqam like the Husseini, that's essentially a C minor scale, but the second step, the 9, and the 6th, the 13, they're usually, depending on the region, but they're usually neutral. So they're in between the flat 9 and the natural 9, and between the flat 6 and the natural 6. Most world music is not harmonic. So the really unusual thing for my music is to take this and not only play the melodies, but to improvise on them, and then on guitar or keys have microtonal harmonies comping behind you. Then I also have a continuum. People think I'm so microtonal. It's actually not true. So what I do is my music, unlike other microtonalists, I don't really limit myself to one system. I always have stuff that's regular 12 notes per octave. Then I move one step over, and just like the blues, we'll have normal chords, and then you bend on top, or you'll have, let's say, Middle Eastern scales that you play over normal chords. The next step is kind of a reverse blues concept. You have somebody who plays normal lines, but you're pushing microtonal chords underneath them. And that gives that kind of clash, hopefully beautiful sounding, like blues. Yeah. And then the extreme, obviously, is to have microtonal modes and melodies with microtonal chords and arrangements underneath. So there's a continuum. It goes from so-called completely in tune to very, very kind of far out microtonal. So that's basically the way I operate. And what I love is, again, to come back to that Moroccan example. It was merely because I was the guitar player. I was completely unknown then, but it was an amazing experience. We backed up these 10, 12 Moroccan folklore groups. And over the course of, it was amazing. We rehearsed in Marrakesh for 10 days. Come on. It was
That's really
work.
Cool.
Wow. And then we performed in Seville at the World Fair. But over the course of those 2 weeks, there must have been, 30, 40 Moroccans who pulled me aside, and they were like, "Did you know that Jimi Hendrix was here?" And I would say, "No, I did not know that." But that really left an impression.
Yeah.
So in some ways, my music kind of celebrates a possible living Hendrix.
Yeah.
Someone who's now in their 70s, retired, lives in Casablanca or wherever, and every now and then on the weekend we'll go downtown to rock the Casbah.
Dude, you got the avatar laid down perfect, right? I like that. Hey, where can if listeners want to get more information on this, because this is all guitar guys, where can they go? Do you have any programs or anything, or do you have any stuff you've written or lessons online or something?
Gosh, yeah. I guess that they should just come to me.
Okay.
Look, what I tell people, the exciting thing is you really get to, as one microtonal composer told me, right now there are more tuning systems than there are composers. So the exciting thing is it's very easy to be a microtonal Captain Kirk and really go where no one else has gone before.
Yeah.
So I tell people it's awesome. It's you and a machete. You're out in the wilderness. The problem is, at the same time, is it's you and a machete.
Yeah, man.
There is no online source. You can't go to Guitar Center and
hey, can I get the microtonal DVD?
Yeah. It's like, do I get
lesson 1?
10 easy steps for microtonal comping by this or that author?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they should just get in touch. I can send them some stuff, and I have simple arrangements for an Arabic melody and a quarter tone string quartet.
Awesome.
And I can send examples, and they can see how the music is layered.
Very cool.
Performed. You can try your hand at soloing and microtonal comping.
That's great. Thank you. Hey, hang on, and I'll give all that contact info out at the end of our interview. But thank you for explaining that, man. It was interesting. And also, this is like, I'm thinking, like, if you have OCD, this is like a dream for you. All right. I could see someone with OCD really getting into this and like becoming obsessive with all this stuff going on.
Hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. It's the odd thing is, in the jazz realm, we're probably the last. I mean, obviously there's ancient microtonal music, and some of those madrigals, people are actually questioning what to our ears sound really out of tune. They're actually realizing, oh, they did that on purpose.
Right. Makes sense what you're saying. For
example, there's the prevailing argument to show Bach's genius. He took the new 12, back then that was brand new, the new 12 notes per octave, and he wrote those 24, what are they, preludes or whatever. So he wrote music in all 12 major and minor keys to show his genius and the genius of the new system of how you can modulate and you can do all this stuff, and it's great. Microtonalists point out to anecdotal evidence that in the system before Werkmeister, you had pure tunings. So when you resolved to C major, it was actually more in tune than our C major because it was pure ratios. It was a pure major third, pure fifths. Octaves are pure. So when you came home, it really sounded resolved. And there's anecdotal evidence that when you modulate it away, obviously there would be more dissonance. So their argument is, why would a genius like Bach waste his time? They think he wrote all this stuff to show all the different sounds you can get in all the different keys of Werkmeister. Because the well-tempered clavier, look at the title. It's well-tempered. It's not equal-tempered. I grew up in Germany, so it's wohltemperiert, not gleichtemperiert. Gleich means equal. Wohl means well. And it also questions what Mozart said. How somebody says something and somehow sticks, but he said like F minor is the saddest key. Well, he was kind of a brash guy, and he was not too much younger than, he was apparently aware of that tuning system back then. And for all we know, he might have bragged, yeah, Werkmeister, whatever. I checked that shit out. I tried I tried all keys. He's Mozart, he's genius. And let me tell you something, F minor, that's the saddest key. That's the saddest piece of shit there is. He very well may have pointing out how in the old tuning system, F minor sounded like shit. But now over the centuries, it's come down as Mozart saying, oh, F minor is the saddest of all keys.
Gotcha.
So it's a very interesting, it's really like uncovering ancient knowledge and finding whole new different ways of making music. And unlike, the ancient alchemists who were trying to combine earth, water, and so forth to make gold, with music, you can literally, it's a gold mine. It's amazing what you can do. And to come back to jazz, jazz is probably the most furthest behind because there's microtonal music in the Middle Ages. There's the microtonal grandfathers of Carrillo, Haba, Vishnegradsky, who started doing stuff in the Like I think Carrillo wrote his first microtonal piece in 1896. There's a whole micro metal scene. There's a unbelievably beautiful microtonal electronica scene. I mean, this guy Sevish and some of the other stuff I've heard online, it's astounding. Jazz in some way is the furthest behind. And I think it's an exciting way of coming up with brand new sonorities.
As a guy who's been studying and doing music your whole life, it seems like this is like giving you almost a new enthusiasm for it now.
I mean, you can actually brush the dust of off some of your old really lame licks and give them a new lease on life.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's pretty astounding. To me, actually, maybe the most amazing thing is you can give tonality a new lease on life. There's that saying, oh, everything's been done in tonality. That's why Schoenberg destroyed tonality and did his 12-tone stuff. There's nothing new. And I'm not saying you can't write new, beautiful music but here, I mean, on a previous recording, it's called Flam Blam, and it's dedicated to Jay Dilla and the French composer Olivier Messiaen. And he was an amateur ornithologist, and he used a lot of bird calls in his music. He's absolutely amazing. As far as I'm concerned, when the dust settles on the 20th century, he's going to be much higher ranked than he is now. I mean, I think he's going to be right there with Stravinsky. People haven't really caught on to him yet in the manner that he should be.
What's his name?
Messiaen, Messiaen, Olivier. So I love his music, and I wanted to dedicate it to this piece to him, but I wanted to have real bird calls. So I transcribed them microtonally. So all the melodies and most of the counterpoint is based on bird calls. And I got permission from the birders to use the original sources. So you can hear the bird and then hear how we improvise or how the music is written. So there's this Brazilian bird called the Uirapuru. The bird call is kind of minorish, but it has a weird, it's not quite a flat 7 or a major 7. It's a weird sharp 4. So I have a section where I wrote in the music, it's, improvise in D minor Uirapuru. It's a totally new tonality, but it's tonal.
And where is this on YouTube or anything?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Look up
on Flam Blam.
Yeah, Flam Blam.
Bird calls Messiaen Olivier. Okay.
If you put in Flam Blam in my last name, there's a short EPK.
Awesome.
But so what I tell people, in some ways, my music isn't really microtonal, but in some senses more microtonal. There's tonality, but there's some really, I wouldn't know I recently recorded a record with Georgi Mikadze. He's this microtonal keyboard player from the Republic of Georgia, former student of mine, and we have a record coming out, and he has some of the tunes, they're not major, they're not minor. I don't even know what to call them. It's almost like, you remember those scenes with Spock from Star Trek? He's in his room playing that 3-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
I could imagine this music being in the background.
Right. Okay.
Something that Spock would chill out to.
Very cool, man. Well, thanks so much for explaining this. And again, I'll give out your contact info at the end so people can get a hold of you. You mentioned that you moved to Germany, or grew up in Germany. You moved there when you were a kid. What prompted that move, and how long were you there for?
My dad was from Germany, and my parents thought it would be great for the family to be exposed to two different cultures, and that's probably the best thing they ever did for us. They expected just to be there for 2 years. We moved there when I was 8, and 11 years later, I returned to the States to go to college. So I essentially grew up in Germany.
What was the biggest culture shock when you got there? And then was there any culture shock when you moved back?
Different types of culture shock. One is they didn't have grits, but they had this weird stuff called Nutella, and I didn't like chocolate.
They didn't have grits, but they had Nutella. That's so funny.
That's a positive thing. The negative thing was racism, and I don't want to point the finger. You know, we have some really ugly racism here in the States right now. I mean, in the year 2018, it's embarrassing, and it's unfortunate that our leader at the very top is encouraging that. Let's just say that. But imagine 1972, a mixed race family. My mother was African American. And I want to be fair. We lived in a small town, and, you know, people from that area, they don't travel.
Right.
You know, it's like when you talk to people that you've known for a long time, it's kind of a big deal to move from the Bronx, maybe to New Jersey, or, you know, God forbid, to, like, I don't know, Idaho.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. So if, you know, all of a sudden there's partial racism, but there was also partially there was curiosity.
Yeah.
And I really stuck out. I mean, I'm a light-skinned person, but back then I was downright exotic. So dealing with that was became an issue. But eventually we learned how to speak German, and we assimilated. And as in music, there's good, bad music. There are good, bad people.
Yeah.
I've had long-lasting relationships with German friends and other families that some families were in touch with decades later. So in the big picture, that was the best thing my parents did for us. Because I think the United States is an unbelievable country, but there are often blinders.
Yeah.
And it's partially geographical. Yes. I mean, in Germany, we lived in an area where, we lived near the Dutch border. So in half an hour, you could be in a different country. It was a few hours to Amsterdam, maybe half a day to Paris. 4 hours north, you'd be in Scandinavia. If you drove all day, you would be in Italy. Whereas I remember, my first tours in the States, I remember like waking up in Tennessee, driving for 8 hours, and then going to the next hotel. And guess what? You were still in Tennessee. It's, this is an amazing country, but diversity is a good thing. Travel. That's really, I think, if there's something I can really impress upon guitarists, and, if you had a choice with, if you want to reach out to me, that's great. But if there was the choice of doing that or traveling, I would say travel. That's the best thing you can do for yourself and your music.
I have heard that very consistently, that's the, people have suggested that other players, the best thing to do to open your mind and get comfortable with the world is traveling. And economically, although I didn't grow up in a good place, I was always very grateful for growing up where I did, because I could identify every accent. I like it. It's like, I look at, I've interviewed people from a lot of foreign countries now, and I'm doing that more because I always feel they could teach me something because they got a different perspective, so I could learn a lot. And I like that. I think it's exciting. But let me ask you this. Were you able to, you brought up a good point. Were you able to, at that young age, discern the difference between those who were curious and those who were racist? Because that's got to be, I don't think, something that an 8, 9, 10-year-old could process.
Well, when people call you Neger, which is kind of the German word for the N word, although it's not as harsh as the N word here, but it's not very nice.
Yeah.
You notice when Germans were treated with preference. But at the same time, we're all humans. And I remember situations where there were issues, and then once you got to know each other, you become friends. It's really, we're all the same. We're all in the same boat. We're all struggling to make a living. We're struggling to do better by our kids. To be fair, I can see why people may be apprehensive when a country absorbs a lot of refugees. There's the fear of losing your culture and so forth. At the same time, when I do play some of my world music stuff, and I have people criticize what I do, I say nice and fine, but I have to say, with all due respect, what do you know about your own background? And if you want to criticize me, why am I more fascinated by ancient Chinese melodies than you are? You're from there, I'm not. Why am I more into the absolute incredible North Indian alaps, the intros to the raga, where the art of tone placement is on a totally different level? Do you know anything about that? This is your culture. It's not mine. Why am I just blown away by Turkish ney flutes and you're not? You're just here to be the next, heavy metal god in waiting. If you want to criticize me, then, school me. Why am I more thrilled by your culture than you are? With Hasidic New Wave, I was urging these guys to, put more, Jewish inflections. I was the honorary Jew in the band. I'm like, hey, man, you talk about radical Jewish culture. Why am I the one who's more into it than you are?
Right.
So
you've been able to sort of like process all this very almost not Zen like, but you seem like you haven't like taken anything personal. You're able to.
No, there have been some hard,
Yeah.
Nobody likes to be called names.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I've certainly had my issues.
Yeah.
But hopefully older, wiser, take a step back.
Yeah. Have you found as you've gotten older, like you just want less stress for yourself? So you almost look at things in such a way that you'll have less stress?
Well, that's partially it. Looking back, I'm like, why was I so upset with this person? First of all, I'm not perfect. I can't, for all the terrible things that I've said about other people. It's not like I can point the finger. And also, in the big picture, you have to get along.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, half of the issues in this country seem to be fomented by wedge issue media reporting.
Yeah.
As in, if you take away the wedge issues like abortion, gay marriage, and you look at a somewhat conservative Democrat and somewhat maybe left-leaning Republican, is there a difference? There's no difference.
No, it's just these platforms that you just mentioned that people get on, it seems, and they're, I don't know, man. I haven't watched the news in 35 years because when I was younger, I'm not kidding you, I watched the news with 9/11. That was it. But when I was younger, I started studying self-development, and I started learning about how the stuff you listen to the last thing in the day and the first thing in the morning is what your subconscious absorbs. And I realized the value of, sort of programming your subconscious mind to take you places. And I just said, okay, then I'm just cutting all that shit out. I don't want any negative. And I'm the same on Facebook. Yeah, I haven't watched.
So that's the morning and the evening news.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I stopped watching news 35 years ago. And on I don't engage in anything. I just man, to me, it's like complaining about the price of lettuce. Like, what are you going to do, man? It is what it is. How about figuring out how to make your life a little happier? Because if you're happier, you'll probably be less of an asshole to the next guy. And, so I've just tried to focus on just making myself a little happier, not at others' expense, but, from inside. And, it's selective ignorance, and I'm okay with that. I don't want to hear negative shit. I don't want to, I try to smile and be myself and do the best I can. And, but I don't know. I think a lot of it is what you said. People have these platforms and they feel there's a right and wrong. And I'm also been around the block a little bit. I don't think there is a right or wrong. I think there's what you feel is right or wrong.
And we have to get along.
Yeah. What the hell, man? Who the hell wants not? Shit. Screaming Headless Torsos, great band.
Thank you.
Really good band. You've melded a lot of cool stuff there, in a really cool way. And I hate to give analogies. It's kind of like, you're just a good, if I have, for people who don't know the band, if you took Rage Against the Machine and added jazz and different melodies, and it's really hard to explain, but it's really very cool stuff. And it's very energetic, very powerful, man. You're putting out a lot of energy there. That's what I like about it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But how'd you get the concept to start that band? And is there going to be any more Torsos records in the future?
Yes. We started working with the not so new singer. She was briefly in the band before, Sophia Ramos.
Yeah.
And she's a screamer. It's going to be more rock, but she also has these really cool flamenco and other influences. As a matter of fact, once we get comfortable, I want to microtonally analyze the indigenous music of Puerto Rico, because that's where she's from, and see if we can put some influences in there and do something completely different. I'm excited. Yeah.
Is there a date for a record, or?
We're working on new stuff now, so next year.
Awesome, man. Very cool. What's the biggest challenge with Screaming Headless Torsos, either musically or maybe marketing the music or anything? What is the biggest challenge with that band?
Well, looking back, I have to say, I should have used less influences and had it be more. But it is what it is. Maybe this is my background. People call me the fuse. I guess that's what I do. I fuse, I mix things together. That's what I enjoy. So people call us unique. That's great. It's also hard to fit in, though. It's hard to market. I noticed in a similar interview, it was on the radio, and they were like, "Who are you?" And I was like, we do this, and then we do that, and then you have to turn left, and then you have to go back, but then you have to look down while you're, I've come up with this new idea, a new phrase. I call us avant-hard. Like
that's pretty appropriate.
Like to rock out hard, but it's kind of out there. I would call it kind of experimental funk rock.
Yeah, all of those are like.
But there is the issue of approaching a new audience, people in the business who don't know you, and when a jazz band can say, "Oh, we do jazz," or we do electronica, or we do math rock. There you go, done. It's not that easy for us. What's also is not easy, I guess, to this day, and I don't want to play the race card and make excuses, but particularly for Sophia, she has found it very difficult to be accepted as a rocker.
Because she's Latino or Latina.
She's a woman, she's a Latina, and there's just been a lot of similar issues of people initially taking Meshell N'degeocello seriously. She would rap. She's probably one of the funkiest bass players on the planet. She's an incredible writer. She sings. And people would be like, "Well, what do you do?" And she will be like, "Well, that's what I do." "Well, which one of those?" Well, all of those. And people kind of prefer something narrow.
They want to,
That's a rock band. That's a this band. That's a so and so. They do R&B.
Well, people want to belong to a group, and it's hard. It's hard to put someone who does 5 things in a group, and so I know I've been in sales 30 years, marketing, man, and I know psychology. So everything you're saying is true. People will therefore turn a blind eye to something that they can't jump in the pond with. It's hard to market that. Yeah, for sure, man.
So, and also we're of an interesting age, late 40s, early 50s. There is a difficulty to see. I don't know. I guess people at that age rock out.
I have to disagree because I've seen so many concerts over the last 6 months. There's guys in their 70s on stage.
I don't want to single anyone out, but it's interesting. When I turned 50, I actually had to start to deal with some ageism.
Yeah.
It was weird.
That is weird.
But the market in general wants newer, younger bands.
Yeah.
But I don't give a shit. And I'm just going to, I guess, be old and nasty and funky and play out of tune. Everybody else can F off.
That's it, man. Hey, talk about, I'm going to throw some names of artists you've worked for. And if you could talk about or worked with, talk about how you get the gig and if there's any cool or interesting stories. Let's start with.
The most interesting is probably Jack DeJohnette.
Great, let's do it.
So Jack DeJohnette is one of the best drummers of all time. I mean, he's played with Miles Davis. It's interesting how when I talk to other people, like, "Hey, can we do a McCoy Tyner thing, or can we try this Weather Report thing, or no, what if we did so and so?" These are all references. When I play with Jack, with him is everything is personal experience. He has this low voice. He says, "Well, when I played with Miles, when I played with Coltrane, when I played with Thelonious Monk, when I played with Stan Getz, when I played with Ornette, when I played," it's astounding to work with somebody when all the ingredients they use are firsthand experiences. I mean, the only person of note in the jazz world that he hasn't played with was Charlie Parker because he was too young. But he has virtually played with everyone else. So when he tells you, when he shares something with you and says, "Hey, can we try it this way?" It's from firsthand experience, person to person. That's astounding. So I played a wedding. It was for this jazz musician. So it wasn't your normal wedding, but nevertheless, I was in the wedding band, and it was with Fima Efron on bass, and we were both in Hasidic New Wave, and it was a Jewish wedding, and at one point, Fima said, "Hey, do one of those intros," and Jack was there, and so I did that, and I got the gig. So I played a wedding, and I got a gig. with Jack DeJohnette.
Because he came over to you, like what you were doing.
Yeah, he was like, "Wow, yeah, we should play."
That's so cool, man.
That was great. That was one of those stories.
That's awesome. How about, what was your work? What'd you do with Stewart Copeland? He's another guy who's just a brilliant musician.
Yeah. The very cool thing about that is, so I got a call from this Italian promoter. I had worked with him with this Italian rock band before, and he said, "Hey, so there's this thing going on, and it's with Stewart Copeland." I was like, "Wow, yay, of course." So I met Stewart, and the really cool thing about Stewart is he has the power and the juice to decide what he wants to do. So the ideal summer vacation is, I'm going to go to Italy, I'm going to take my family, and I'm going to play music. I mean, to be able to do that is astounding.
Yeah.
So I met him. He was totally cool. And, at first I'm like, "How are you doing, sir?" And Mr. Copeland, he didn't want to hear about that. He said, Stewart. And he would be there and we worked hard. We would do 8 to 10 hour rehearsals. So lunch and dinner was covered, but he would be there. And he even said, "I like to hang with my band." So for 10 days, every lunch and dinner, we were hanging with Stewart. I mean, it was like being to the point we got so familiar, we started arguing about politics and stuff. And what you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, shut up. He was really down to earth, and you hear it in his playing.
Was this out in LA?
No, this was in Italy.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It's like we think about trying to get a gig.
Yeah.
He's basically almost thinking about vacation. So I want my vacation to be in the summer in Italy with my family with a band.
And I'm bringing my band out there.
Yeah. And it was magical. I mean, we rehearsed on the Isle of Elba, which is a tourist destination for Italians. And then we toured all over Italy and played in these unbelievable old Greek amphitheaters and these really old, those theaters that are really narrow. They go up like 5 stories, and you have all these balconies and stuff.
Yeah.
You may have seen them in an old, those old opera scenes in those movies. I mean, sometimes it all comes together. And what was most interesting for me, because I always loved the Police, but I wasn't like a huge, police fan. You have your Zappa freaks, they know everything. So, and with the Police, and I was like, wow, this is great. We get to play all these really obscure Police tunes that were never really. And so when you listen, people volunteer a lot of information. And there was a little bit of, the friction that came out that was between Stewart and Sting. So what I realized is Police is actually Stewart's band. He hired those other 2 guys to play with him. And the Police sound is essentially Stewart's sound. He came up with that. Maybe the other guys were into it.
Yeah.
But, blending reggae and pop and so forth. And the tunes we played were often Sting reject tunes.
Interesting. Like
Sting became so powerful. I remember Stewart saying, it got to the point when he and Andy were so thrilled when Sting would even consider listening to one of their songs. I was like, oh boy.
Wow.
But the Police sound is really, the way I see it, is Stewart's sound. Because there were some songs that he pulled out that he wrote before and after that were never released as Police songs, but you can clearly hear the Police sound.
I could believe that because his rhythm, it was so critical to that whole thing, man. I mean, that was, it's very believable. Let me ask you this. If you could go back and give young Dave advice that would have made your life easier after X years in the music business, whether it's advice about business, playing, personal, and assuming you were open to listening, what would you have advised yourself?
Couple of things. I'll point the finger at myself first. And this is a normal thing. But as a teenager, initially I had 3 food groups: loud, fast, and distorted. To me, that was a nutritious meal. And I still love that. That's wonderful. But there's so many other things. And there was a period where I practiced scales for 11 hours a day, and it was a total waste of time. Going back, the best thing should have been learn tunes, and in that context, learn, the theory, the scales, the chords, the parts, and so forth. Because you learn things faster and better inside a musical context. That's number one. Seems like a no-brainer, but people get off on tangents and practice stuff that's not really useful. Number 2, rhythm. The people that work in this business have a fat sound and a fat pocket. And I grew up in Germany. I wasn't exposed to P-Funk and so forth until I returned. And the men and women, what separates the men and women and the boys and girls in the business from a playing perspective is pocket. If there's one place where commerce and art connect at the very top, it's groove. Anyone who's anything in the business, 9 times out of 10 times will have the best bass player and drummer.
Very true.
And the best, I'm not talking about the vicious chops. I'm talking about the fat pocket.
The groove, yeah.
Because there's this very simple truth. You get hired for how great you sound. You stay hired for how great you make the band leader sound. Then I wish I had known from the get-go 2 things. This is a very social business. And success, more often than not, is through connections. Again, that sounds like a no-brainer. But I thought very linear. And the first time I realized this, I went to a club. They gave me shit. They didn't want to hire me. I didn't draw that well, and they gave me shit. For some reason, they gave me another chance. I drew quite well. It wasn't full, but it was, I'm thinking linearly, things are going up, and they gave me shit. So I realized, I do well, they don't like me. I do poorly, they don't like me. And that's where I realized for the first time, this is a social business. Because there are some clubs, they keep having me back. I don't do well. It's because they like me. And there are other places I could do okay, but they won't have me back. That was kind of a bitter pill, because I thought, it's really, when you look up to people like Hendrix and Miles and Coltrane and James Brown, you think, well, the best are rewarded. Well, if you look at top 40, that's not really.
May not be the truth, yeah.
Another thing is, if you're young, hit the road, especially now. It used to be bad before. Now it's the only way. Because you can't make money selling CDs. People don't even buy CDs anymore. And you have to build the fan base. And that's something I didn't really realize. Nobody told me that initially you have to eat shit. You need to hit the road, sleep in your van, sleep on people's floors. If you break even, that's a success.
Yeah, for sure.
I was already doing like jazz gigs, making, like mid 90s, $1,000 a week, had my own hotel room. For somebody who's fairly new, that's a success.
Yeah, very much.
I didn't realize that often it's normal to double, quadruple up in hotel rooms. sleep in your van, sleep on people's floors. But you have to get out there and build that fan base, because that's the thing that keeps you alive.
Ask you this with respect to the comment of being more social. Were you like harder to get along with, or are you not like just not good with small talk? Or
yeah, I was never good with small talk and so forth. I wouldn't say, I was hard to get along with, but I just always looked at the business as a business. I draw 5 people. Why would you want me back? I draw 1,000 people. It's a no-brainer. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It works that way often, but not all the time.
So you were talent-based. You were looking at talent and proficiency, and not incorporating the fact that you got to be a good hang.
Yes, but also just in terms of the numbers, just because you do well doesn't mean somebody will have you back.
Yeah.
And just because you do poorly doesn't mean it's a dead end.
Yeah, I get you.
That kind of zoned me out. I was like, well, this is not fair.
Right. If your perspective is based on technical and you had more of a logical, looking at it logically. And how did you learn that because, where would you learn that from? That, hey man, you got this as part of a social thing.
Hopefully, an older cat takes a younger cat to the side and explains the birds and the bees of the biz.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the golden rule of the business, of the music business. The people you step on your way up are the people who step on you on your way down. Not everybody makes it to the top, but everybody at the top at some point descends.
Yes.
I mean, think of any large band that played stadiums. Are they playing stadiums now? No.
You mentioned that comment. I had interviewed several people in Fame Studios, Muscle Shoals, and there was a guy named Barry Beckett there who was part of that, one of the founders, keyboard player, I believe, but he was one of the business heads. And he had a sign in front of his door that said, be careful whose toes you step on the way up, because they will be attached to the leg that kicks you in the ass on the way down. So, something very similar to that. Yeah. And I've heard that many, many times from other players. So it's very true, man. Hey, let's talk about gear.
I mean, just one thing.
Yeah.
Stewart Copeland. I was surprised when he said, I wasn't surprised on how hard it was to get to the top. He said, I was surprised at how hard it was to stay at the top. When you think about hit after hit after hit that they had, the huge tours that they did. Now, unfortunately, artists are not the most fiscally responsible.
Right.
But, if you even have half a brain on your shoulders. But I was shocked when he said, I was surprised how hard it was to stay at the top. And they have the currency, hit after hit after hit. You would think it's automatic open doors and red carpet treatment everywhere. It's not. Think about the Super Bowl. Why does band X play over band Y or Z? Sometimes I look at the Super Bowl, I was like, why are they playing that? I haven't heard anything from them, at any point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you see another band, it's like, okay, they're big, but they suck. It's at some point it's all big. Why is it a certain, it's because of the connections and the juice that they and or their manager or record company or agent have. It's often not how great they are.
Interesting. But I understand it, because it's kind of like saying it's easier to make money than to keep it, sort of thing. I kind of get that.
It's like, I mean, again, if I look at hit after hit after hit that the Police had, and then to hear that it was hard to do that, it makes sense that it was hard to get there. But when you have that currency, why is it hard to stay?
Yeah. I have to get a guy like him on the show and ask him that question. That is very interesting. Man, let's talk about gear for a few minutes. You've got some really interesting guitars. What is like your go-to, and what other two would round out your top three?
Right now, I have a Campbell American double neck guitar. I've had a number of them, really good ones, but they're heavy. And this one is the first one. It uses American linden. It's a light wood, and it's chambered. So people look at my double neck and like, wow, that must be heavy. And when they pick it up, they're shocked. It's not light, but there are plenty of Les Pauls that are heavier.
Sure. What are the strings? What's the strings? You have 12 strings on top, or what are your 7 on the bottom, or what do you have? So
I had one with 7. This is Dean Campbell. We kind of got into a fight. He's more of a vintage guy. We did things my way and with mixed results. And finally he said, "Hey, shut up. We're going to do things my way." And he made it really simple, and he was right. That's the one that sounds the best. So it's 6 string on the bottom, Gibson scale length. And it's I think it's a 19-inch on top because I wanted a shorter fretless scale. I was kind of trying to imitate the vibe of a an amplified Middle Eastern lute, or Indian sarod, which is also the Indian lute.
So it's 6 strings on top?
6 strings.
Yeah, but fretless.
Both have same string gauges, 11 through 50. So what happens on the shorter string length is the strings are a little floppier. And they just kind of, the instrument is electric. It's not an acoustic instrument, but it is chambered. And with the floppier strings, it's a more stringy sound. It has kind of an acoustic-y sound, amplified, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What's number 2 and number 3 that you're reaching for?
Number 2 would be the same double neck style, but made by Ozgur. So that's Ozgur, Turan, Turan, from Turkey. Dean Campbell was based in Massachusetts. He went out of business because he had these strange vices. Like he actually cared about his instruments, and he didn't want to outsource, and he didn't want to use cheap parts. In this business, no good deed goes unpunished, so that killed him. That'll kill you.
Yeah.
He took pride in his art, and eventually he said enough is enough.
Sure. I've interviewed a couple of luthiers, and they all said this is not a business to be in if you want to make money.
Yeah.
To a man, they've all said that.
Yeah, and really the things that sell are Strats and Les Pauls.
Yes, for the most part.
Just to let you know, he made a knockoff Strat, vintagey, his style. He called it Angry Angus. And before he even went public, he had orders.
Oh, wow.
Versus all the cool, vintagey, weird stuff that was difficult to sell. So
yeah, it's Strats and Les Paul and Strats are the body shapes that usually sell best.
Yeah, that's 90% of the market, I hear.
Yeah. Have you ever sold a guitar you wish you could get back?
Well, I keep moving forward. I'm not one of the type of people who I couldn't really use them. I need this double neck. I need access to fretted and fretless. And there are other instruments that I like, but I wouldn't use them. They would just be sitting around, and kind of from a vibe or conceptually, I would prefer to have them in the hands of somebody who would really appreciate them. It almost means more than getting a great price. Obviously, I can't give stuff away for free.
No, I totally get that, though.
But there's kind of a spiritual... I destroyed and burned a guitar once, and it's the worst thing I had tendinitis. I was really frustrated. This guitar I had already fixed, and then it broke again, and I lost it. It was a very, very cheap guitar. But after I went Jimi Hendrix on it, I felt like, there's something about this. This may sound strange, but I think every instrument has a soul, and it wasn't my right to do that. I should have put it in the hands of somebody else who appreciated it. That was a very bad experience.
Man, but I think we've all done stuff like that, like out of frustration or immaturity or just can't handle it at the time or bad timing or whatever, man. I think everybody's made mistakes like that. And then you're just like almost ashamed of how you behaved. I know I have been at times. Yeah.
I was ashamed.
Yeah. I think we've all done stuff like that as part of growing up. I think the good thing is that you don't keep you don't keep.
No, that was it.
Yeah. Usually one and done. That's okay. I always give myself a pass on the first one. So
that was the end of my, well, I think Jimmy only did one. Who was the guy who did it all? The guy from the Who?
Pete Townsend.
Yeah, that was the end of my Pete Townsend career.
Yeah, he busted a shit ton of them. And how does playing guitar make you feel? What's the emotional vig for this to keep you doing this?
Well, I really had a love-hate relationship initially with the guitar because, especially if you're interested in jazz, the guitar is the odd man out. A lot of the jazz repertoire is, if you look at initially the music, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, those are horns, comping is piano. There's some guitar in there, but let's call it call it for what it is. The real action is when, the saxophone player solos.
Yeah.
So Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, quintets, John Coltrane quartets. When you start playing guitar, you can't really comp like a piano, and you can't play those really cool horn lines. You're really kind of the odd man out. And it took me a long time to get or to try and even get a fluid linear thing going on. And it also took me a long time to realize that the strength of the guitar right away is to create space. I mean, there are certain artists like Rudra Mahantapa. He usually has guitar players comping. I haven't asked him specifically, but what the first thing the guitar does is create space. Because one problem with piano is that you can play these huge chords. But the problem is to temper ability with restraint. And a lot of people don't want to do that. I mean, you hear that, there's always these kernels of truth in music jokes. And there's that, you probably heard this joke where somebody says, "Hey, have you heard of this new piano player?" And you say, "Who?" And I say, "Phil." And you say, "Phil who?" And I say, "Phil all gaps." And I thought it was a stereotype until I actually played with this guy. This guy was hammering down chords all the time. What happens is they junk up the space. One of the art of Thelonious Monk is to do these large 3-note voicings where they're almost more orchestration of their colors. So right away, the guitar does that automatically. And if you hear someone like Schofield comping, I forget I need to research this. It was a record with Patitucci. There was this tune. It was almost like he was challenging himself. How small can I play voicings, 3-note voicings, 2-note voicings, 1-note counterpoint, but still imply the harmony, the melody, the tune, etc. and you can create space. So there's an actual real strength in guitar comping. Obviously, you have total monsters like, the vocabulary of Holdsworth or Ben Monder and so forth. So it took me a long time to. I always loved the guitar, but I didn't love playing it because it was hard.
Was any of your parents musicians? Or musical?
My dad studied classical piano and he painted. My mother also got into art, but for most of their lives, I mean, my dad was in sales, and my mother was a housewife. She eventually went back to school and taught biology and chemistry.
That's really cool.
She also, but she also did stuff like this. I don't know. Can you see this?
Yeah.
She would do like these. This is like these reliefs.
Yeah. It's like a sort of abstract painting there, man.
And gosh, they just passed away. And do you like art? Because we're gonna have to throw some of this stuff away.
I can't see it. It's backlit.
Oh,
yeah, I see that.
These like teacups and bowls, like this thing here.
Yeah.
Let me know. I'll hook you up because I mean I have 2 boxes. I'm actually going to drive to a friend's place and put in storage, and there's other stuff we have to throw away. But anyway, it was a very.
And you just lost both your parents.
My dad this year and my mother a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're sorry.
So we're in the process. We cleared out the house and everything.
Were they still in Germany? Or were they here?
They moved after 2 years. They moved back. So I returned 83, and 85 they moved back to the States.
Yeah.
So they were very supportive, and there was a lot of art and music in the house.
That's really cool. That's the number one thing people ask me, for whatever that's worth. What is because I've interviewed so many, like close to 400 people now, and people have asked me, what's the number one thing or the top things people have in common? And the number one is they came from a supportive family of support. Even if there was like dysfunction in the family, the parent, mom and dad was very supportive of the music. By far, the number one, probably 98%, which is, I think really cool.
Although I have to say, my mother forced me.
Oh, wow.
She cracked the whip. And at one point, she said she kicked herself when she realized I got really serious. My parents both told me, like, yeah, we'd prefer if you were in chemistry or something, but if this is what you really want to do.
Well, it's good they supported you, though, man. It's really nice. It's important. Desert Island Discs, man, I'm really interested to hear what your answer. Yeah, I don't think, are you going to be all over the board? Are you going to, if you pick like, Foreigner and,
Well, I get that. I've gotten that question a lot, and I would like to put a spin on it.
Yeah.
How about a list of dream discs? And that is, I'd love to hear a recording of Miles with Hendrix. I'd love to hear a recording with Dolphy and Thelonious Monk, Eric Dolphy.
Yep.
Those are the main. There's a main. I had a list. I mean, I do have my favorites, which are the Bad Brains. The German operatic punk singer Nina Hagen.
Yeah, sure. Do you know Tony Bruno?
No.
He's a guitar player in New York. He played with Nina for quite some time.
Oh. Another dream is Bernie Worrell in the 70s with Miles. Or the 80s, because that's like when Miles came back, Bernie orchestrated. I realize it doesn't matter if he's soloing or if he's comping. He's always thinking about colors and the bigger picture, and that's what Miles was looking for in his piano player. What was that guy, Robert something the third?
Don't know who was playing.
Miles was comping himself. So I
don't know why I have to ask you about a certain player. I don't usually do this, but this guy popped to mind while I'm talking to you, so I'm curious if you know him. Nat, the singer. They just made a Netflix movie out of him. I'm having a brain fart. Nat King Cole. His guitar player, Oscar.
I forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know anything about him? I don't know. Something just told me to ask you about him.
I somehow that came up, and I kind of made a little mental note that I need to go back and check out Nat King Cole's trio, because the way piano and guitar played together was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's popular culture, but I don't understand why Nat King Cole isn't universally preferred over Sinatra. I mean, it's a mystery to me. And I understand Sinatra is very conversational. He connects. I get it. And of course, there's black and white.
I was going to say that was the peak of it. Was Oscar Moore was his name, but it was the peak of. There's a really good movie about Nat on Netflix. Great documentary. And if you get a chance, check it out. And there's another real good one on Quincy Jones, which I didn't know half the shit he did. But it was a real good movie on Nat. And I mean, he was a guy you talk about. He was hosting a television show that was rated #1 in its time slot, but nobody watched it because he was black. and it was still rated #1, so they had to pull him off because it was like rated high, but they're not getting enough people. It was just crazy, man. So, and that guy was really an incredibly talented guy, man. I mean, his guitar player, Oscar Moore, just off the charts, man. Really good, really good player.
Yeah.
Man, I'm going to wrap this up, so I want to ask you 3 more questions. Most important things that you've learned about yourself, Dave, throughout your career experience and through life in general?
As Marcus Miller said, and I haven't, success-wise been at the level as he's been, but he said, when you get back home, he says he pauses outside of the door and he says he realizes it ain't about me. So when it comes to your personal and family life, those are bigger things than music. Music is great. Don't get me wrong. It's the shit. It's amazing. But there are bigger things. And if you can realize that, I think that makes you a better musician.
And you feel the same way. You feel you have. I mean, you're married. You have kids. Big family, or?
Yeah, I'm married with a kid. Yeah.
Okay, so you feel the same way. There's bigger things than music.
Oh gosh, I mean, people have asked me, "What's your favorite solo?" And I would say, "My son. It's the best solo, the best solo I'll ever take." And God willing, I'll take it for the rest of my life.
Good for you, man. That's very cool. Happiest moment or time in your life?
Happiest, best or worst, or what?
No, happiest moment in your life or happiest time in your life.
I mean, obviously my son. I mean, he just radiates light. Certain gigs I've been on, certain gigs I've been at. I mean, being in love. When I was 25 or so, realizing how great my parents were.
Wow, that's
you grow up and you worship, your parents are like gods. And then when you're in teens, your parents are stupid and idiots and you know everything better.
Yes.
And it's kind of a funny story. I was going to Hampshire College, and I was with a lot of students who were brilliant, way smarter than I'll ever be. Unbelievable. Well, let me put it this way: unbelievably intelligent, but not that smart.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know anything. They'd never been exposed to anything. And to realize, to grow up in two different cultures, and by the time I returned to the States to go to college, traveling through the States and Europe, they love to travel parts of North Africa, I just had a larger view. And, you know, my mother being black, my dad German, and proving, you know, you can get along. You know, with marriage, it's obviously ups and downs.
Of course, man, any relationship.
But, you know, they were quiet revolutionaries in their own way. So I tried to call them, couldn't reach them, and I left this message like, hey, I just want to thank you. You know, I realize how great you are, and I love you, and so forth. And the funny thing is, all of a sudden, I get these messages from my sister. Hey, can you call me? Hey, what's going on? Hey, it's kind of urgent. So to make a long story short, my parents weren't used to this, and they were afraid I was suicidal.
You know what? As a father of adult children, I could understand that.
So because apparently that's a thing, I don't know, but apparently there's this thing of tying up loose ends and saying, and kind of saying, so they thought I was going to off myself.
Holy shit. I could totally get that though, man. Yeah.
So, but realizing, wow, my parents are actually really cool. Gosh.
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
That's cool. So, my son, my oldest is 28 and he has a 4-year-old, and it's only in the last 3 or 4 years since he's had his kid where he's come to us and said, I really appreciate you guys and I want to thank you for everything. And it's great knowing. 55. I just turned 55 last week.
Oh, I'm going to be 55 in a couple months. Man, you look young.
Really? I love you, man.
You do. You said mid-40s, early 40s?
Oh, dude. We have to have a drink. I just want you to say that over and over again.
Okay. Mid-early 40s?
I've been going to the gym my whole life. So maybe that, I don't know. I don't, having no hair, I look at myself and I'm like, fuck, man, I see all them damn wrinkles. I'm like, shit. But thank you. I'll take it when I can get
way more. Look at my forehead.
No, man. Look at us like two old ladies.
I had this shit since I was like 19 or something. It's like, damn.
Yeah, I don't know. But thank you, man. I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. I have a young voice, so sometimes I'll talk to people on the phone and they're like, and then I'll make a reference of music from the 70s, like, and they're my age or older, and like, how old are you? And I tell them, man, you sound really young. I'm like, thank you. But you know, when you look at me, the words and music won't match. So, but thanks, bro.
Oh, hey, you got it going on.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. Last question, Dave, and I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being so candid and open, man. And I've enjoyed this. What's been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years? And how much of this change has been intentional and deliberate, and how much is just a natural part of aging?
Oof. Have I really changed? Just realizing I'm not perfect and trying to be more forgiving, trying to be more, you know, when I see the Obamas with the Bushes, they obviously have a great relationship. And you would think they would be at each other's throats. I mean, maybe George W. can now point at Trump and be like, "Hey, man, you know, I'm not that bad."
Yeah, the frame of reference has changed, so you know, perceptions are all based on frame of reference, man.
But it's just coming back to that, like, man, we're all in this together.
You said being more forgiving. Is that to yourself as well?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, because I know I've cut myself more slack. Not that like, my work ethic or anything has changed, but just as a human, I've been able to cut myself more slack and just say, hey, you know what? It's okay if I make a mistake, or if it's okay if this happens, and I'm okay with me because I know my intention is here, and I'm happier with that. Again, less stress.
Maybe being a teacher, I was been kind of astounded at how much I could learn from students and how much I could give back and help. It feels good.
That's awesome, man.
So adjusting my view of, you might actually be able to achieve more by giving more.
Yeah, man.
Versus working harder and being more organized. I mean, besides that.
Dude, I am with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm perfect. I mean, I've had some pretty serious run-ins with people over the last 10 years where now I look back and it's like, was that really necessary? So it's the kind of like the general idea of, besides working towards your goal, kind of also just kind of sitting there and throwing out that fishing line and reeling it in.
Yeah, man. Seeing what the universe tells you to do.
Yes. Universe, listen, I need help. I'm listening.
I know those are big words, man, but they're really important. They've been for me anyway. They've been tough words for me, but they've been profitable. Emotionally profitable, Dude, I can't thank you enough. Let me tell people where to find you and how they can get connected with you. First of all, it's Dave Fiuczynski, and let me spell his name and take out a pen and write this down. It's David, D-A-V-I-D, of course, Fiuczynski, Fiuczynski, and it's DaveFiuczynski.com. I'll spell it one more time before we go. And his Instagram is there. And check him out at DaveFiuczynski.com, and Torsos for Screaming Headless Torsos, torsos.com, Torsos. And Dave also is available for lessons, and he's a guy who's been teaching a long time. So if you're looking to get lessons from someone who can take you from here to there and probably give you some shortcuts, not because he's got a gut feeling about it, but because he's doing it a long time, hit him up. And I'll give you his email. It's D as in David, Fiuczynski. Again, Fiuczynski at Berklee, Berklee, as in Berklee College, .edu. All right, at berklee.edu. And that cover everything, man?
Yeah, awesome.
I really appreciate your time,
really
man.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend on your social media channels. Really appreciate your support and help with this. Thanks so much to Dave Fiuczynski for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. And check out his music. Check out Screaming Headless Torsos, and definitely be on the alert for the new record. They're really good. Really, really good band, man. Tons of energy. And I couldn't believe there's like a whole live concert from you, like, at this club in the city that's not even around anymore. I think what's the concert on YouTube?
The two big live ones are Knitting Factory,
the Knitting Factory,
1996, and 2004, I think, in Paris. Well, that's not in town here, but those are the two.
The Knitting Factory
concerts.
show is great, man. That's not even around that club anymore. That's awesome, man. So check that out at the Knitting Factory, Screaming Headless Torsos. Make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get on our newsletter list so you and I can connect. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.